Welcome to the City of Everett Planning Commission meeting for January 17th, 2023. Kathy, please call the roll.
Chair Finch,
Here.
Commissioner Zielinski,
Here.
Commissioner McGinn,
Here.
McGinn, Commissioner Ballard,
Here.
Commissioner Chatters,
Here.
Commissioner Adkins,
Here.
and Commissioner Lark.
Here. Thank you. Instructions to participants. For those of you in the room, welcome back. To those of you joining us remotely, please mute your phone, or if you are calling in, mute your microphone, or if you're calling in, mute your phone by pressing *6. After each of our action or discussion items, I will ask for any public comments. If you are participating remotely and would like to provide public comments, unmute your microphone, or if you are calling in, unmute your phone by pressing *6. After you provide comment, please mute your microphone or phone. Approval of minutes for December 6th, 2022. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Lark. And a second? Thank you, Commissioner Zielinski.
I have a few things.
Yes, please.
I have a few little minor things about the minutes. The first thing is Commissioner Lark was not here for the roll call, but he did join the meeting, and it seems to me that should be noted somewhere in the minutes that Commissioner Lark joined the meeting. Yeah. Second thing is that on page 3, under citizen comments, under the very first one, it just says a Baker Avenue citizen. I'm wondering if we have that citizen's name, but did that not, you couldn't get that on the tape?
Yeah, for some reason it didn't.
Oh.
She didn't have her speaker on when she first started.
Oh, I see. Okay. The third thing is that down at the bottom of that page, under the item motion, it says Commissioner Atkins made a motion to open the public hearing, and that should be to close the public hearing. One little typo on page 5. Under the public participation plan at the end of the first paragraph, it says Mr. Vasquez asked if the commission knew of additional tools, and that's new with a K.
Must have passed my spell check, yeah. Sounds good.
That's it for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Zielinski. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as modified by Commissioner Zielinski? Thank you, Commissioner Lark.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Zielinski. Kathy, please call the vote.
Commissioner Lark,
Yes.
Commissioner Adkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Chatters,
Yes.
Commissioner Ballard,
Yes.
Commissioner McGinn, sorry,
It's okay. Abstain.
Commissioner Zielinski,
Yes.
Chair Finch.
Yes. Okay, great, thank you. Reports of the commissioners. Does anyone have a report today? Commissioner Lark.
I just have two things I want to make note of. As we prepare to go in and assess the comp plan and reevaluate it coming up, I think there's two things we need to do in preparation. One of which is, and this was in conversation with York, identify a parcel of land that has been developed, changed, modified since our last plan, but not in the way that we expected. Because there's one that jumps to mind, but essentially what happened is we zoned it one way and it did not pan out. So kind of doing a deep dive to seeing what happened there, what was the market forces that kind of shaped and changed the course from what we were hoping to see with our land use plan, I think might give us some insights as we evaluate it. Secondly, I think another thing we need to do is start looking at this through a financial lens. There's a wonderful firm out of North Carolina, U3 Analytics, that looks at land use potential and the cost to have essentially the current built structures on there right now. And they kind of evaluate what tax revenue can come from it, what it costs to support the land use there, and vis-a-vis roads, utilities, et cetera, services, and how much taxes are generated by that kind of potential built environment. And I think when we look at that, we need to look at what we want to do and also have that information, like what kind of financial resource generation will come from potential changes to the city, because this is the city's largest and most abundant resources, the land that exists, and it needs to be properly stewarded and managed to generate surpluses and provide for amenities for the citizens. So I think that we need to have that as a part of the conversation.
Thank you, Commissioner Lark. Any other comments? Yes.
I just wanted to mention that this past weekend, starting Friday, was the 2023 MLK Greater Everett Area March and Rally, as well as other celebrations. The City of Everett was a partner with Snohomish County Black Heritage Committee in bringing that to folks. It was a really wonderful event. I know that City of Everett put out some media on that, maybe their Facebook page, other web pages that has some of the mayor's comments. I was honored to be able to speak. There were a lot of really great speakers from the community, a lot of wonderful, young, talented artists, so I hope video of that comes out soon as well. And affordable housing was definitely mentioned. So that is something that is on the hearts and minds of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lark, excellent comments, and I would say that relative to properties being developed in ways that weren't previously contemplated, maybe that's an offline conversation with the planning director, but I would be interested in being in the room when you have that conversation. And then as it relates to tax benefits, I think that probably falls under the economic development purview, but it is something that's being talked about actively at the city. And so I would encourage you to reach out to Dan Ernest because I know that he is very invested in these kinds of metrics. So the only comment I had was I believe that Sound Transit comment period is soon opening. I guess as a planning body, it would be great to have an update relative to the latest and greatest with Sound Transit. Okay, staff comments.
Thank you, Chair Finch. Good evening and Happy New Year to the Planning Commission. I was going to look up exactly when that scoping comment period for the Sound Transit Everett Link Light Rail extension is. I believe it's in the first week of February or so. I'll see if I can get that by the end of the meeting. Good idea that the Planning Commission could get engaged in that, and definitely we want to spread the message so that everybody who lives in Everett and around it is affected by the light rail can get their comments in at this early stage in that process. I'd love to hear, Commissioner Lark, some of the parcels that you had in mind, and I think it's a great exercise to look at kind of what we thought might happen in a place where it wound up differently. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, maybe neither, but either way, how the plans can change. And would love to do kind of an analysis on that, and if there's anything we want to build into our development regulations and framework in the future. And we have seen a couple presentations from the U3 group on the land value per acre and some of the financial metrics that come along with that. I think one interesting thing we learned is that the hotel behind us, I think, not sure which direction I'm facing that way, has the highest land value per acre and tax revenue. I think it folds in some of the sales tax revenue in the county. So we'll try to get a presentation scheduled on that if that's something the commission is interested in. And the Alliance for Housing Affordability has a contract with them, I believe, and is coordinating some of that work. So that's something that they have offered to share with staff and planning commissions around the county. You will be electing a chair and a vice chair later today. I thought I'd talk just a brief minute about those chair duties for your consideration. From the bylaws, the hard duties are to preside at meetings like Commissioner Finch has admirably done over the past year, recognize speakers, help guide debates, and bring discussions to a resolution in the form of a resolution, sign resolutions and other written materials on behalf of the Planning Commission, and act as Planning Commission liaison at official functions. I don't think we got you to any official functions last year, and I'm not sure what was really in the minds of the framers of that section of the bylaws. But if we find any official functions for the Planning Commission, that would be the responsibility of the chair. And then some softer duties, coordinating with staff on agendas and helping staff guide and prioritize the commission's work over the year, especially as we're more able to be proactive, hopefully, in the near future. Accessory dwelling unit update, really appreciate the work that was done in December. I thought it was a great example of collaboration, debate, and compromise in the commission here. I think it was complicated, but that was unavoidable. It's a complicated topic with a ton of moving parts and a number of you to come to agreement. So I thought it was a great example of collaborative work on your behalf. Kathy spent a lot of time listening to the tape and crafting the minutes that you voted on today. I think that if those were the only errors in that whole document, I am doubly impressed by the work. Again, it was complicated and we went through a lot and went back through a couple things a couple times. So we worked on the staff resolution and the amendments to it that are in the staff packet. That's the connection between the minutes and the resolution 20-04. We confirmed the content after the fact with Chair Finch and some of the technical corrections that we talked about in the meeting as well. We think that the resolution that you have at your tables, it's also at the front desk there, and it's on the Planning Commission website for those watching at home, should correctly represent the discussion and the decision that was made at the December meeting. But if you do spot anything else that doesn't seem quite right from what the conversation was, please let us know and we can talk. The next steps, we are working with the mayor on polishing up the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. So it goes from resolution format and kind of the work that we did here in the Planning Commission, and it needs to become an ordinance with the memos and other materials to the city council. And we will bring that to them as soon as we can. If staff winds up recommending anything different from what the Planning Commission recommended, we will be very clear on that, both to the city council as well as back to the Planning Commission. The State Department of Commerce has a short course on local planning that they offer annually. I think Commissioner Chatters may have taken advantage of it last year and had some good things to say about it. There are 3 of them coming up. There's a 3-hour series that covers all the nuts and bolts of planning under the state's framework. January 25th in the evening, March 23rd in the evening, and February 28th in the afternoon. Highly recommend it for those who are both new to planning or established in planning and looking for a refresher and some good content. Yes.
Point of clarification, is this the same class just offered 3 different times, or is this 3? Oh, better.
Yep, same class, 3 different times. They also offer to come to planning commissions and have a training for all of us together. Not sure if that's something we'd be interested or not, but just something to think about. Maybe something we can consider over the next year. 2023 is upon us, and we're excited about a solid work program this year. We've got an agenda for today, and then I think in the coming months, February and March, we'll hear some of the results. I've mentioned this at past meetings. The Housing Action Plan implementation grant from the Department of Commerce is delivered. We're pretty well through the work program right now. There's a draft report we just submitted to the Department of Commerce, and 3 ordinances are coming out of that. So 3 pieces of legislation, one on updating and expanding the city's multifamily tax exemption program, and one on the park impact fee waiver and other waiver, impact fee and system development charge waivers. Many of you will remember the Planning Commission had a recommendation on the park impact fee waiver about a year ago when we did the park impact fees. So this would be an opportunity to potentially revisit that decision with more information. And then we'll also be bringing the overall report, which has a lot of interesting information on the finances and the development and feasibility for large-scale residential development within the city. We learned a lot from it. We continue to learn a lot from it, and we're looking forward to having the consultants and staff come present that to you again, I think February, maybe March.
February.
And then we're working on a couple more targeted code amendments. We're really trying to get to focus on the comprehensive plan update this year. I think 2023 is going to be a big year for that project, but there still remains lots of little work that we need to do. The accessory dwelling units was one example of that came out of the Housing Action Plan. We have a request for some targeted work on the Heights chapter of our development regulations that connects to school development. We have lower height limit than is necessary for some school expansions in the city. and the school districts would like us to take a look at that. And I think there were a couple other tweaks related to polishing up rethink zoning in the Heights chapter. So we're doing some staff work on that, and we'll look to bring that to you later this year. I don't think it's going to be in the next couple of months. And then looking at potentially fences, also the fence chapter, and focusing on infrastructure security with that. And then similar, take the opportunity to clean up any sort of errors or anything like that that we've noticed since Rethink Housing. And then the comprehensive plan, which I really hope to be the bulk of the work and the work program for the year with the Planning Commission. Alternatives refinement coming up soon, and we'll reconnect with those alternatives that we discussed last year. Go through the goals and policies in a methodical way, and then continue with the outreach and public input. We've been having meetings, public meetings almost weekly between open houses and neighborhood association meetings. We had a couple planners at the MLK March talking to folks and hearing what we can hear, so we try to get out into the community in both large and small ways. And then the sound transit, I've got a note there, and when I find that scoping period, I will share that with the commission maybe at the end of the meeting. That's all for me. Happy to take any questions or responses you might have to any of that.
Thanks, Eric. Will the Everett Housing Authority be back in front of us in '23?
Yes, they will. I will check on that too.
And then finally, the riverfront development. I think at one point last year, we talked about maybe getting an update on their progress and any changes that they anticipate from the plan we previously discussed in this forum.
Yes, we'll do that. Right now we have progress, but I don't have any specific proposals for changes to the development. I know they're still working on securing anchor tenants and other commercial tenants. Buildings A and B are about done and starting leasing, and buildings C and D are in permitting. So that's at a very high level, but I'll get you some more.
Okay, that's great. Okay, Kathy, any public comment today on items not on the agenda?
We do have one remote caller. Would caller ending in 007 have any comment? There's no comment?
Yeah, he just turned his mic off.
No comment.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think next on the agenda is election of 2023 officers. Do I have a motion for a planning commissioner chair for 2023?
I would like to motion to nominate Commissioner Chatters for chair.
I'd like to second.
Excellent. Any other motions? Wonderful. Can we have a vote?
Commissioner Lark,
Yes.
Commissioner Adkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Chatters,
Yes.
Commissioner Ballard,
Yes.
Commissioner McGinn,
Yes.
Commissioner Zelinski,
Yes?
Chair Finch.
Thank you, yes. Okay, next up is motion to elect the vice chair. Do I have a motion for vice chair?
I want to make a motion to elect Charles Adkins vice chair, but I understand that our bylaws prevent that currently. And I would at the same time like to make a motion to amend the bylaws to allow an appointed or alternate member to serve as the vice chair by modifying Article 2, Section 4, and then modifying Article 2, Section 3, where it refers to the duties of the vice chair in the event that the chair is not available, to just include that the voting is in accordance with Article 4, Section 2, which describes the voting rights of the alternate members.
I can second that.
So I heard two motions. I think the motion that's currently on the table has to do with the modification of the bylaws. Is that correct?
I think that's correct.
Okay, all right. And I'm not aware we can actually change the bylaws in this form or not. I refer to the director.
The director's reading the bylaws. Commissioner Chatters, did you happen to look up that, or Kathy, if you've got the?
Yeah, regarding amendments, it says Article 9, these bylaws may be amended by a vote of at least 5 regular members of the Planning Commission. So they are available for amendment. And the reason why I raised this is because I recall last year when this discussion came around, I know that Commissioner Adkins was nominated, but then he could not be nominated because he was an alternate. And I think our alternates' voices are still really valuable, and vice chair there's work, right? So why not pass the work around to folks who are willing to serve in that capacity? And I think, I'm not advocating altering the language for the chair to be able to be an alternate, but I think the vice chair is a bit different. Perhaps we could treat it a bit different. So that is what my amendment is aimed at, is just simply allowing the vice chair to be filled by an alternate, but not altering the voting rights of an alternate member.
So confirmed Article 9, these bylaws may be amended by a vote of at least 5 regular members of the Planning Commission. There are 5 here. There are 5 here. So it looks like the unanimous vote of the 5 members present could amend the bylaws, after which
I was just thinking, Title II, whether or not there's a restriction in Title II.
let's check city code, if you could bear with us a second. The commission is also governed by chapters 214 and 220 of city code. So alternates shall serve in the absence of members when so asked by the commission chairperson, and when serving shall have the same powers and responsibilities as duly appointed commission members.
The chair were absent.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a circular thing there. If the chair is absent, then the vice chair would have to assign themselves to be the kind of regular member for the day. So I can see an issue with it, but I wouldn't say that it is outright prohibited. We have not been taking that step. It's been kind of implied each time.
That was my first thought, was what about when the chair is absent? How does that impact it? And so based on my reading of the section which describes how the votes of alternates are treated, which is Article 4, Section 2, I'm not advocating changing any of that language. I'm just advocating referencing under Article 2, Section 3, which describes the chairperson's voting, that their voting be in accordance with that section which describes the voting rights of the alternate. So I guess in some ways I'm trying to separate out those two pieces and say that the vice chair can act in the role of the chair in the absence of the chair, but it does not change how their vote is treated.
Right.
And point of clarification, I mean, like, I didn't read the bylaws before I came here, but I think Commissioner Zelinski and I have been here probably the longest out of everyone here, and like, my tenure, I can't remember any instance where we had to refer to the bylaws for like a procedural or allocated tie-breaking vote, or like vote dedicated to the chair. So I could be wrong, but I don't think it's in there. And that might also ameliorate any concerns by an alternate taking on the chair's role, because say if there were a sufficient number of people here, the alternate is serving as chair, just you would still be able to have a vote that meets all the legal requirements, even if the chair doesn't vote. And there's no requirement for the chair to vote so far. So I don't see any concerns there, but I do see a bit of the circular stuff there. But I think in a functional way, for critical votes, we won't have a problem on that front. That's just my observation. Please feel free to assess and say, I'm wrong, but yes.
So I'm going to give an example of where it could come up. So when we had the ADU debate, we had 2 alternates present, but we only had 1 commissioner not present, and so only 1 alternate could vote. And so they had to alternate votes based on the bylaws. So there could be an instance where the chair is the only member not present, and therefore the alternate is serving as the vice chair, and there is also an alternate present. So they both have to alternate votes. So there could be a vote where the vice chair acting as chair is an alternate and therefore cannot vote, which is why I'm trying to separate those 2 pieces and not change the bylaws around alternate member voting, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And also, going up, there shouldn't be a problem with that, because there's no dedicated or allocated votes for the chair. Like, the chair doesn't have like a tie-breaking vote.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes sense. The other scenario I was thinking of is that we don't typically do this step. It's kind of assumed, but the chair is supposed to recognize the alternate as a regular member for that meeting because there is an empty seat to be filled. So if the chair is not there, then the vice chair would be identifying themselves as the regular member. I don't think that's actually a problem. Giving the time to go through both of those, it seems doable. And I think we have to elect a vice chair today, so this is not something that we can push off to next month to do research on, although if we had amended the bylaws and we would prefer to amend them differently next month, that's something that we could clean up.
I think we should just keep discussing this possibly until around midnight or so, and then we can have a vote.
Second, I second that.
I'm comfortable moving forward with selecting or voting on the prospect of a vice chair who is an alternate member. So unless there were others that would not like to amend the bylaws, I guess it's time for a vote.
And are we clear what, as I was going through the circulars, are we clear what the wording is? Proposed wording?
Well, I got it in recording, so. To restate, the amendment on the floor is to amend Article 2, Section 4, to add the word or alternate, add the words or alternate. So Section 4 will read, "The vice chairperson shall act for the chairperson in his or her absence. He or she shall be an appointed or alternate member of the commission," would be how that section would read after the amendment. And then, if necessary, amending Section 3 above, referring to the chairperson's duties by adding the wording after "and voting thereon" to "in accordance with Article 4, Section 2, which is the section that references the alternate voting bylaws.
Got it.
Commissioner Lark?
I don't think you can.
That's right, I cannot vote
Point
on
of
this.
clarification, it is my understanding that only regular members can vote on a bylaws amendment?
Correct. Thank you for the reminder.
Kevin Ballard? Commissioner Ballard?
Yes.
Commissioner Chatters?
Yes.
Commissioner McGinn?
Yes.
Commissioner Zelinski?
Before I vote, I'd just like to say that I don't normally like to operate in this way where we're considering a bylaw amendment without having been able to think about it in advance. So I'd just like to ask my fellow commissioners if in the future, if there's any proposed changes to bylaws that someone wants to propose, that we make a proposal to consider it at our next meeting. I realize the difficulty of doing that today because we need to vote on a vice chair. And I've heard enough here of the discussion from Commissioner Chatters to make me feel reasonably comfortable that it's been thought out, and with the staff's help on this, I think I'm prepared to support it, but I would like in the future to not have to deal with bylaw changes in this manner. Having said that, I'll vote yes.
Chair Finch,
Yes, and I concur with Commissioner Zelinski's comments. Thank
I
you.
also agree. Thank you.
Okay. Well, congratulations to both of you. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That's incorrect.
I would like to nominate Commissioner Adkins for vice chair.
Second?
Commissioner Lark,
Yes.
Commissioner Adkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Ballard,
Yes.
Commissioner Chatters,
Yes.
Commissioner McGinn,
Yes.
Commissioner Zelinski,
Yes.
Chair Finch.
Yes, congratulations, Commissioner Chatters and Commissioner Atkins. Okay, I think next item of business is the proposed shoreline master program amendment.
Bylaw amendments should make the Shoreline Management Act look simple by comparison.
Yeah, I don't know. Good evening. My name's Karen Stewart. I'm an environmental planner at the city, and I also have a couple of staff people who will be assisting with this presentation. You'll notice and I'll introduce them later. On your agenda, the item is to consider limited amendment to our Shoreline Master Program for Silver Lake. But we thought before we launched into the specifics of that, I'd take a few slides here to give you an overview of our Shoreline Master Program, because we haven't dealt with that in a number of years. So it starts out with a somewhat busy graphic, but what is intended here is to sort of show the enabling state legislation for our Shoreline Management Act and kind of draw it in parallel with something that I know you're familiar with, the Growth Management Act. So in a similar way to the GMA requiring or authorizing local jurisdictions to prepare comprehensive plans, the Shoreline Management Act enables local jurisdictions to prepare shoreline master programs. And then they come together as the foundational piece for code changes, for regulatory changes. So the Shoreline Management Act actually precedes the Growth Management Act by almost a couple of decades. So back in 1971, when at the federal level, a lot of environmental legislation was being passed, our legislature and governor at the time was concerned about what was happening with development along our shoreline areas. So the local legislation was, or the state legislation was passed, creating this Shoreline Management Act. And the primary goals are as follows: foster all reasonable and appropriate uses. So you might think about Everett's shoreline area, all the industrial uses as our heritage of paper mills, nail factories, log sawmills with log rafts and all of that. Those are considered water-dependent uses. Also, the goal of the Shoreline Management Act is to promote recreational uses. So in this slide, I see some sailboats in a marina. Public access and navigation are fundamental goals of the SMA. And then thirdly, protecting our natural resources and the ecological functions, and in particular, salmon habitat has in recent decades become a paramount concern. So the SMA and local governments basically have to work together. It's a cooperative working relationship, just like with the GMA. And local governments are required and supported by state funding grants to develop and maintain shoreline master programs. The shoreline master program has to be approved, though, by the state before it's effective. That's a little different than our GMA comp plan. The city of Everett adopted its first shoreline master program back in the bicentennial year, 1976. The last periodic update that we completed was in 2019. Some of you maybe were on the commission at that time. Our next one won't be until probably 2027, so in the future. So what is a shoreline master program? Well, there's some key components, and the first one is really the one that we're going to be talking about tonight in relation to Silver Lake. So it's a characterization of shoreline conditions. There's also a policy framework that's the foundation for the environmental designations, which is the next item on the third bullet. And those are shown in a map, kind of like zoning. And within shoreline jurisdiction, the shoreline environment designations actually are the zoning, if you will, within shoreline jurisdiction. And then the fourth bullet is that there are development regulations that are within the SMP that are referred to by staff in permitting shoreline uses and shoreline modifications. Shoreline uses would be a marina would be a use. A shoreline modification would be dredging to construct the marina. So where does the Shoreline Master Program apply? So here's a link to the actual document and the map, and it's on our website. But sort of in a summary, when you think of the larger water bodies in the city of Everett, that's where it applies to the water itself and the lands under the water. But it also applies, the very last bullet talks about 200 feet landward of the shoreline jurisdiction, the water body. So marine shorelines and associated wetlands, the Snohomish River, portions of the Salton River that are in our water supply area. Lake Champlain is also in the city's shoreline jurisdiction. The 100-year floodplain on Smith Island, as well as the marshlands and Silver Lake, and that's what we'll be talking about in a few moments. And so here's a map that the colored areas, Silver Lake being down here, show in general, give you a reference of shoreline jurisdiction. So Silver Lake, hopefully everybody has been there, beautiful lake. You can swim in it, fish. There's no motorized craft, but you can hand carry your boat down the dock. Approximately 102 acres, publicly owned, and there's extensive parks and trails. They're trying to build the trail, all the city parks trying to build a trail to circumnavigate the entire lake. I can think of one commercial property with a dock that's also on Silver Lake. So now I would like to introduce Dana Zolteff, who's with our surface water section, and Heather Griffin, who's the manager of that section, is also here tonight. And Dana will talk a little bit about what is called a limited amendment for the Shoreline Master Program discussing Silver Lake.
So you
So I'm Dana Zlateff, and as Karen mentioned, I'm in Public Works, and I'm in the Surface Water Management group there. And I'm just going to kind of give a little bit of background of where we are and really why we're looking to do this amendment. So when we were taking a look at the narrative in the Shoreline Master Plan, there's a very detailed description currently of Silver Lake. However, it is very outdated and conflicts with our city's current stormwater code and standards, which we actually just recently updated this summer in August. We've been collecting data on Silver Lake for 30 years, and we have a wealth of information now, as well as I'm going to chat a little bit more about some more information that we've done recently. And the narrative is just very outdated, and much of it, you're going to hear me talk about this study from the University of Washington, and that actually should be 1989, so it was about 30 years ago. That this study was done for Silver Lake, and we have since learned so much about it. However, the study is throughout the narrative in the Shoreline Master Program and is really not correct for what we know about the lake today. Really, why we're looking at this now and why we're wanting to update it is a couple of reasons. One, as I mentioned, we have 30 years of data the city's been collecting out there, and I'll kind of present that data graphically in a little bit so you can see. But also, we went through a significant surface water comprehensive plan last year. We really took a deep dive of all of our drainage basins in the city of Everett and updated what we know about Silver Lake and the Penny Creek Basin. And that information is accurate in today's time and up to date. And we really want to make sure that our management master plan, shoreline master plan, is also consistent with our surface water comp plan. We worked with a consultant specifically to look and take a deep dive at this University of Washington study that was done 30 years ago and where we are today and what we've observed in our water quality. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that study actually was, to give you a little bit of background. So back in 1988 and 89, the University of Washington did a study of Silver Lake. And it's about a year of data on Silver Lake. And projected the lake to have very good water quality. But what they did is they looked at scenarios or alternatives of what could happen in the future. And they kind of projected up to the year 2000, which, okay, that was 23 years ago, of where we would be and under what situation. So kind of think of the framework as back in '89, we did not have stormwater standards, right? We do now. We had certain ways we looked at how to control sediment going into the lake from types of land uses and development that's happening. We have a lot of regulations now. So back then it was kind of trying to predict what would happen. And it wasn't dire, but it was going to say, hey, it was going to get worse. But over the past 30 years, based on what we knew from this study, the city decided we're going to voluntarily monitor Silver Lake every year and have done that to kind of determine what the trends would be over time. And basically what the data has shown is the predictions in the UW study did not happen. And so we don't want to rely on that study in our Shoreline Master Program now because it is outdated, it's not accurate, and we want to basically report and characterize the accurate conditions of the lake today. As I mentioned, we do, the city does monitoring voluntarily for the last 30 years. We just transferred about 2 years ago, that monitoring over in a partnership with Snohomish County to actually work with the citizens of Silver Lake to be part of that monitoring. And they come out with this great health report card, which can be found online, and they have characterized the lake water quality as excellent. So this is this graphic, and I don't want to get too technical, but really what it visually shows is over the last 30 years, you can see that the data has basically been unchanged. And just to give a little bit of background, when we really look at lake water quality, we're looking at biological productivity, and it's really looking at 3 parameters, and that's one is how far clarity can you see through the water column. That's what transparency is. Total phosphorus is how much nutrients are coming in or being cycled through the lake. And then chlorophyll A is really looking at algae, like how much do you have going on. So the blue area is called oligotrophic. It means it's got low biological activity. It's good. And that's where Silver Lake has been sitting. That's where back 30 years ago it was sitting, and it bounces around a little bit. Mesotrophic, which is moderate, medium productivity, that's okay, but we like to watch it so it doesn't get so high, because basically if it gets towards the purple, your water quality is deteriorating. You're going to get more blooms and algae, and it just won't be as clean of a place that you'd like to swim. And so I just wanted to share that Silver Lake has been very steady, and we want to characterize that accurately in our shoreline master plan characterization. So the recommendation in the shoreline master plan is really to update the narrative. We really want to make sure that it's clear of what stormwater management requirements are applicable, and that is what is in our city code that we've adopted. There's some language in our narrative that footnotes water quality treatment, stormwater facilities that are actually not as effective as today's treatment facilities. And if we were to allow that, we would actually not be in compliance with our own city code and or ecology, who is requiring us to implement the most current and up-to-date stormwater management practices. So that is some confusion we really do want to clear up and clean up. And then we just want to ensure that the narrative is accurate. I do want to make a point that it is just the narrative that we're changing. There are no Silver Lake, the policies relating to these elements are not changing. We follow our water quality code for that, our stormwater code. There are some other measures that the city does to protect Silver Lake. So I did mention, we follow Ecology's 2019 Stormwater Management Manual for Western Washington, as well as Ecology's programmatic stormwater municipal permit, phase 2 municipal permit, which basically is saying we're going to maintain stormwater facilities and we're going to street sweep and we're going to have all these operation and maintenance programs, all these things that didn't exist when this UW study was done that we're doing now. Again, doing the voluntary monitoring that is continuing, and then there's a Lake-Wise program which has some great educational materials that is available to homeowners for lake-friendly landscaping and natural yard care. The city does have regulations in our code which will remain regarding prohibition on feeding geese and ducks, and then there's, of course, critical areas regulations related to Silver Lake and buffers on wetlands. I did want to mention the city has done for a number of years Eurasian milfoil removal, where in the littoral zone or the shallow zone to go and use divers to actually hand remove invasive plants. They also do a survey to determine the extent of vegetation and have done that for many years to remove milfoil, which has worked in. We haven't had any in the lake for at least 2 years. So that's it, if you have any questions.
Just a-
Karen or I?
Just a quick, so we're updating the narrative to reflect what's accurately going on. Now, does the narrative, and during this presentation, you stated that we aren't changing any policies, but does the narrative reference to drive policy changes, or what's the, how is the narrative utilized in this entire process?
Besides, do you want to speak to that? Yeah,
sure. So with your memo, you didn't get the actual underlined strikeout proposal?
No, I have it, I read it.
do have that?
But
Okay.
my question is like, if
So
we
it's not
change.
going to change, it's not going to change the environmental designations of what would be allowed to be permitted to be constructed in the shoreline jurisdiction. So it's really, it's substantive, but it's not foundational policy changing.
I know it's not policy changing, but is it like a reference point for policy? Because the narrative says this, we don't need this policy. Because the narrative says this, we should do this policy. And if it doesn't actually change any policies and doesn't actually give any guidance, my follow-up question is, do we even need it? And then.
Yes, why we
Okay.
need it is the very first bullet I had of what is a shoreline master program. It's a little bit of a SMA phrase. It's shoreline characterization. So that's meaning the sort of the foundational underpinnings, the scientific water quality conditions that is sort of foundational for each of our water bodies. And then we look at trying to maintain the best condition, or perhaps do restoration in certain areas. It all depends. You know, all the water bodies are treated differently. So Silver Lake is more of an enclosed environment to some extent than our marine shoreline.
So this narrative is the characteristic of it, which is required by the SMA. And the characteristic of it is basically the very quick analysis of the status of it, which would basically kind of give us a thumbs up, thumbs down on where we're at on what we're doing, or?
Yeah, so you might think of it this way. We have better data that's more recent now for Silver Lake than we did back in 2018, 2019, when we were doing the periodic update. So the study was released after that date. And what it was showing with the graph was sort of the trophic state or the overall lake condition. And so maintaining the highest water quality that we can, but still allow public use of the water body and, you know, the development in that area. So it's sort of this balancing between those different goals. And why we're talking about changing the document is because the UW study that was sort of future casting when it was done, it made some projections or some ideas of poorer water quality in the future due to development around the lake. And because of all the best management practices and the things that we have been doing, partly because of our stormwater treatment, hasn't come to pass. And so we've maintained the good water quality of the lake, and we want to make sure we're reporting that in the Shoreline Master Program.
I guess, I'm sorry to do a deep, be pedantic, but I think of the Voting Rights Act and the Supreme Court ruling a few years ago. Supreme Court's like, oh, hey, we don't need the Voting Rights Act because trends have gone the right way. So when I'm looking at this, like, I am not really qualified to assess the hydrology and like condition of this. But my thought is, if by changing this, do we just basically give a blank check to say, oh, you know, we can just change all the other requirements that we have that feed water into the lake or that manage how we how we treat this lake simply because we've given it a green stamp. Does that kind of make more, does that kind of, the way I'm looking at it, make more sense now
Well,
to
the
my question?
study, so the basic study, scientific study that has been done in the last few years was not available with our last update of the Shoreline Master Program. And because the current adopted document now has misleading information in it, that's a concern of staff. We want to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information that we have and reflected in the adopted document. So then there's no, it doesn't, it would not be able to be used to change regulations, and that would have to go through a similar process like this if somebody was trying to cite that study and then take it to some next step of how to use that study. So that would be another amendment, another opportunity to talk to you about that. So.
Roger that. I'm tracking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to comment on Commissioner Larkin's last question and comments that really a lot of the policies and practices that impact Silver Lake are found not in the SMP, but in the stormwater management regulations, which are updated on a more regular and frequent basis. So I have no concerns that this is going to somehow write a blank check for future mismanagement, let's say. But I have a question also for staff. I'm wondering, I certainly see the need to update the narrative, but I'm wondering if there's any value in preserving the old narrative just for historical purposes. And it could be done, it seems to me, through an amendment, or excuse me, not amendment, but an appendix to the body of the SMP, just to provide sort of the historical evolution of the SMP. So we see where we were back when we first started this, and here's how we've evolved. But just preserve that original narrative. There might be some historical value in doing that. It's my thought.
In general, though, these narratives, I mean, it's a 20-year plan, and the idea is that we use the best information we have when we do an update. Unfortunately, this new study wasn't released when we did the last update, and staff did talk a little bit about, well, should we wait until we're doing the update in 2027? That seemed too far in the future to have not the most accurate information, so that's why we're bringing this forward now. So from a historical standpoint, we have bookshelves and now online versions of like the version that was adopted and approved and made effective by Ecology in October 2019. That will always exist. So then this new version, should it be approved with this amended language, will have the new language. So we have to be careful we don't make these documents so voluminous in the single volume or all these appendices of historical. Remember, I said it was first adopted in 1976, and I think we had 7 limited amendments between that time and when we were doing the update in 2018. So we do have all that information if somebody's interested. But the important thing is to take a snapshot in time of what's happening with our water at that time and then plan accordingly.
Any other questions? I had one question. It seems that the reason behind the proposed amendment is to correct errors that, I guess the difference between what was anticipated in 1988 and what's happened over time. And some of that is driven by the data from the voluntary monitoring. It seems like a lot of what you're working on today hinges on this voluntary monitoring. Is there a way to make it something other than voluntary so we can be sure that there's a longitudinal history that goes forward, so you can continue to monitor that data? I mean, to me, the presentation, is hinged on this data.
Yeah, and it's voluntary in that so much of what we do is required by, for example, the Department of Ecology or other regulations. And we as a city have, yes, determined that this is a value and that we're going to continue the monitoring and have done so for 30 years because it's important for us to understand the condition and the trends in Silver Lake. So maybe voluntary is not the greatest word to use, but it is not mandated by the state for us to do it, but yes.
I see. So it's not mandated by the state, but it is a part of
what
a
we do in our
process that's galvanized somewhere.
Yes, and has been for 30 years
Great.
and has been continuing so far.
And I'm a little familiar with the program at Snohomish County, the Lakewise program, and so it's professionally overseen by county staff. And so there's what they call citizen scientists, where they teach people who are interested in Silver Lake or maybe own property abutting the lake who want to, of course, maintain the water quality. And so they have the vested interest in that. And I think where the volunteer comes in is that they're volunteering their time and their effort. So it's, in a way, it's wonderful for the community in that we have people who are interested in being stewards of shoreline areas or just any areas, so.
That's great. Thank you for explaining that. Okay, yes.
Just a quick clarifying question. I heard you say that all of the policies that drive what is done are currently captured in the municipal code. Is that correct?
No, that is not
That is not
correct.
correct? Okay.
And one of the differentiations between the Shoreline Master Program, and in fact, I've got it over there, it's a 3-ring binder. Obviously, it's online too, but it's contained within a single document. So there is no longer 3 different places you have to go to learn all the different pieces of shoreline jurisdiction and regulations. And that's different than our comprehensive plan, where you've got your policies and goals in the comprehensive plan. Then you have the municipal code that's in a separate place. And then you've got your zoning maps, which are part of the code. So what we have tried to do is pull it all together under the Shoreline Master Program document. And the state encourages that because what happens if you have critical areas code in a separate area, over 20 years, we might, or even, so we update this every 8 years. We're always making changes. You've heard Yorick talk about some code tweaks that are going to be coming up. What happens is I think there's like 260 jurisdictions that are required to use to prepare shoreline master programs. That's a lot for the state to keep up with, obviously. So what they prefer us doing is having this compiled document all together. And so if you happen to look at our Shoreline Master Program, yes, the critical area regulations are listed there as a regulatory aspect of shoreline jurisdiction. However, it's a specific date version of it. And so if for some reason we change our critical area regulations such that we think we need to, staff and the electeds think that we need to change the version that's applying in shoreline jurisdiction, we'll have to go through a whole process similar to what we're just starting here for this amendment. And we have to have ecology do a similar process. So it's very staff intensive, so it doesn't come up very often. And just to let you know, sort of next steps with this, we're doing this initial briefing, and we've just started conversations with staff at Department of Ecology. Next month, they will be looking at what we're actually proposing to change in the text, the underlined strikeout. And we'll be working with them, and we have to, so we'll be making sure that what we bring forward to you next time, and certainly before we ask you to make a recommendation to the city council, has met the standards that ecology will be asking for, so they do an early look at what we're proposing, just because of this whole process. So,
Thank you.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Kathy, any public on the phone?
Would citizen with phone number ending in 0007 like to make a comment?
I believe that's Ishmael, and it wasn't working.
He just
so-
muted, so no comment.
Great.
Okay,
thank you.
he emailed me one. I can read it, if you'd like, yes.
Please.
From Ishmael Mohammed, he couldn't get it unmuted earlier, so here are the comments. I appreciate the extensive discussion of the Planning Commission for the changes for the ADU ordinance. I would like to draw the attention of the Planning Director and Commission that the motion to exclude UR4, LI1, and LI2 for ADU permitted zones was not discussed or offered for any public comments. I want to bring it to the attention that this change is astronomical for myself and many other property owners in these zones. I request that more research and discussion need to happen, and therefore this change needs to be remanded back to the Planning Commission before sending it to the council. Please also see my earlier comments on this matter.
Great, thank you. Any further commissioner discussion?
Just point of clarification, circling back to the comments I made at the top of the commission, the hearing, sorry, as it was, this meeting, about doing a case study and having you three come in and present information to us in preparation for a comp plan discussion. York said if there's appetite from the commission, we should do it. I'd love to vote on it so we can put it on record and say, hey, this is something we want you guys to do. If that's the moment right now to do it, I'd love to do it. But if it's not if it's out of order, then it's a technical question. Is that in order for me to make that motion right now?
I'm wondering, next month, we're planning to bring the Housing Development Incentive Program information to you, and there's a lot of, we had a market study done that talks about what's happening here in Everett and the financial feasibility, and I wonder if maybe you can hear what that report has to offer, and then if you're looking for more information, that we could make that a separate plan, because it does discuss our height incentives, why we're not getting the heights that we anticipated. We're expanding the MFTE program, and so there's a lot of financial analysis and data there that suggests why Everett isn't seeing the development that.
I think that hits definitely on maybe the case study component of what I'm looking at. But as for the analysis of what should be where and are we best stewarding the land and what land use is the best to generate resources for us to accomplish our goals, I don't know, does that hit that question? And does that hit that analysis?
I would say that
Not
it may
specifically.
inform that question, but without reviewing the study, it's difficult to know how closely it approximates your aim. So perhaps you could distribute the study well in advance of our upcoming Planning Commission meeting if you already have it. And that way it gives Commissioner Lark ample opportunity to put together a barrage of questions.
I question it no other way.
That sounds good.
Anything else on that?
Nope, that sounds good to me, if
Okay.
that's okay with the commission. I do have a couple other notes now that
Please.
I've had some time to get some dates together, and I really appreciate the prompt. That probably should have been in staff comments to begin with. So Sound Transit public scoping is scheduled January 23rd to March 10. So comments due by March 10, that's probably the most important date. There will be a website going live at the beginning of that period with some information on the proposed alignments. So this is where the tracks will go, where the stations will go, where the operations and maintenance facility will go. There will also be public scoping meetings. An important one to put on your calendar is in person at Cascade High School on February 15th in the evening, 5:30 to 7:30. There's also a virtual one on the February 7th and March 1st. And then on the Everett Housing Authority Park District, we do have scheduled in April another check-in with the Planning Commission on the progress in that design. The consultants and the authority have been doing a lot of good work on that. There's, before that though, there are community meetings scheduled January 23rd at Bakerview Community Room and January 24th online. I'll send all of this, that was a lot of dates. I will send all of it to the commission in a email, and we'll put it in the minutes for folks to follow along at home. I think that was it, along with the public comment.
Great. Oh, yes.
Question on the market study, is it a public document now? Can it be made available now?
We have a draft we're still working with. I would not call it, everything is public record. I hesitate to share incomplete drafts and then trickle out information over time. But we have a check-in with the consultants tomorrow. We did share it with the Department of Commerce, so it's at a fair place. So we'll check in and see what kind of the level of comfort with it will be. Certainly would not be opposed to sharing it. It's just whether it might confuse the issue to have multiple versions hanging around. So we'll check in and I'll get you an answer by the next meeting.
I guess I was hoping it sooner than the next meeting.
Sure. Okay.
I'm okay with the word draft written on something.
Sounds good.
Great. Any other comments, questions? Yes.
I'm just wondering if staff has anything to say about the future filling of Commissioner Lavra's spot on the commission? Do you know
Yes.
if the mayor has any
Yes,
nominations?
we had received 7 or 8 applications. We've had 1 interview so far. We have a couple more interviews to go, and that process is pending, and then we'll bring it to the council for their confirmation.
So maybe by March, we might have another commissioner here.
I would think by February,
Maybe
it
even
would
by
be my
February.
goal, yeah.
No, okay,
The
great,
council's
thank you.
pretty quick with it.
Lastly, I just want to thank Commissioner Finch for chairing for the last year. It's a lot of work. So thank you.
My pleasure. All right.
One quick thing, just reading through the bylaws today, I realized that there's a lot of non-gender neutral language in there. And to give the commissioners appropriate time to consider an amendment to that language, perhaps we could include that on our agenda next time around. Thank you.
Yeah, I think if you're comfortable with it, staff could take on the work of proposing a draft. The city council authorized and staff has been working on scrubbing all of Everett municipal code of gendered language, and I think it'd be very appropriate to do the same for the bylaws here. Thank you for the note.
Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thanks all.